Have you ever caught yourself thinking, not yet, not this year, when things settle down, when I have more time, when I feel ready, when the right moment arrives? You say it quietly, almost without noticing, and the day passes, and another passes, and the not yet accumulates into months, into years, into a stretch of time that you look back on and cannot quite account for. The life you were going to live is still waiting, still somewhere in the future, still contingent on a condition that keeps moving forward as you move toward it, always just far enough ahead to remain out of reach. Most people never examine this pattern directly. They live inside it as if it were simply the way things are, the natural rhythm of a life that is preparing itself, getting ready, building toward something. The examination is uncomfortable because the examination reveals something that the not yet is designed to conceal. The not yet is not preparation. The not yet is avoidance. And the thing being avoided is not the complexity of the external circumstances. The thing being avoided is the confrontation with yourself that the actual life would require. This video is about that confrontation, about what the postponed life is actually postponing, about the psychological mechanism that makes postponement feel like wisdom rather than fear, about what the depth tradition understood about the urgency of becoming and what it costs to indefinitely defer it, and about what it would mean practically and specifically to stop deferring, not in the dramatic sense of burning everything down and starting over, but in the quieter and more demanding sense of beginning today to live from the actual center of yourself rather than from the waiting room outside it. Let's begin with the mechanism, because until you can see the mechanism clearly, the pattern will continue to feel like reasonable caution rather than what it is. The mechanism is this: the actual life, the life that would express who you actually are rather than who you have been performing yourself to be, requires you to be visible in a way that the postponed life does not. It requires you to make choices that reveal your actual values rather than the acceptable version of your values. It requires you to produce work, relationships, and ways of being in the world that are specifically and unmistakably yours, and therefore specifically and unmistakably open to the judgment of anyone who encounters them. The postponed life requires none of this. The postponed life is safely potential. Potential cannot be judged. Potential cannot fail. Potential is the most comfortable form of selfhood available to a human being, because it makes no claims that can be tested and therefore sustains no defeats that have to be absorbed. The not yet is, at its deepest level, a protection against the exposure of actually living. And the protection feels like wisdom because it has the vocabulary of wisdom. I am not ready. I need more time. I want to do it right. These sound like the statements of a careful and responsible person. They are also, in many cases, the statements of a person who has learned that the actual expression of themselves, in their original environment, was not safe, who learned early and durably that visibility is risk and that the safest self is the potential self, the self that has not yet shown enough of itself to be rejected, criticized, or diminished. The not yet is the adult form of the same protection the child developed when the environment made clear that full self-expression had costs. The child could not choose otherwise. The adult can. But the adult's nervous system is still running the child's assessment of the situation. And the child's assessment says, not yet, not until it is safe, not until I am certain, not until the conditions guarantee the outcome. The conditions will never guarantee the outcome. This is the part the postponing mind cannot fully absorb, because the postponing mind is organized around the belief that sufficient preparation will eventually produce sufficient safety, and that the actual life can begin once the safety has been achieved. The safety is never achieved, not because the world is uniquely dangerous, but because the kind of safety the postponing mind is seeking, the safety of guaranteed acceptance, guaranteed success, guaranteed non-failure, does not exist in the domain of actual living. It exists only in the domain of potential. And so the postponing mind stays in potential, perpetually, waiting for a condition that, by the nature of what it requires, can only be met in the place it is trying to avoid. If something in this is pressing on something real, take 1 second now and subscribe. The work we do here is the interior work, the layer below the postponement where the actual life is waiting. Subscribe and hit the bell. Let's keep going. The depth tradition has a specific and urgent way of framing this, and the urgency is not motivational. It is structural. The tradition understood that the human life has a shape, not a rigid predetermined shape, but a shape in the sense of a developmental arc that wants to move in a particular direction, at a particular pace, with particular work to be done at particular stages. And it understood that when the arc is interrupted, when the development that should be happening at a given stage is postponed in favor of the safety of potential, the interruption has consequences that compound over time. The work that was not done at 30 does not simply wait patiently to be done at 50. It accumulates. It generates symptoms. The unlived life does not disappear because it is being ignored. Presses. It manifests in the specific discontent of the person who is living a life that fits reasonably well but that has never quite felt like theirs. In the recurring sense that something is missing. In the restlessness that arrives in moments of apparent success and says, yes, but not this. In the dreams that keep returning to places and possibilities that the waking life has been declining to inhabit. There is a concept from the depth tradition called the unlived life, and it is worth sitting with because it captures something about the cost of postponement that the usual productivity conversation about procrastination entirely misses. The unlived life is not simply the life you have not yet had. It is the life that the actual self has been pressing toward and that the constructed self, the persona, the managed version, the safe and acceptable edition of yourself, has been declining to allow. It is the creative work that was always there but was never serious enough to pursue. The relationship style that was always authentic but was never acceptable enough to adopt. The way of being in the world that was always yours but was never legible enough to the people around you to risk performing. The unlived life is specific. It is not a vague fantasy of a better version of things. It is the particular, peculiar, entirely individual expression of who you actually are, the expression that the postponement has been preventing from becoming real. And the unlived life does not simply accumulate without consequence. It accumulates with interest. The longer it goes unlived, the more urgently it presses. This is one of the most consistent findings in the clinical literature of depth psychology, and it is one of the most consistently misread experiences in the lives of people who encounter it. The midlife crisis, the cultural shorthand for the eruption of urgency and restlessness that arrives in the middle decades of a life that has been well managed but somehow not quite lived, is not a malfunction. It is the unlived life announcing that the postponement has run as long as it can, that the accumulated pressure has reached the level where the containment is no longer working. That the actual self, deferred and managed and kept safely in potential for decades, has finally produced enough internal pressure to begin breaking through the structures that were keeping it underground. The breakthrough is not always welcome. It frequently arrives in forms that look like crisis rather than opportunity. The relationship that has been working well enough begins to feel unbearable. The career that has been satisfying begins to feel hollow. The life that was constructed with care and intelligence begins to feel like a container that no longer fits. These experiences are frightening, and the culture's response to them is almost always to treat them as problems to be managed. to repair the relationship, revitalize the career, redecorate the container. But the depth tradition understood them differently, as invitations, as the unlived life finally generating enough force to make the postponement untenable, as the actual self pressing through the walls of the constructed life and demanding, with an urgency that is proportional to how long it has been kept waiting to be allowed to live. The question is not whether this pressure will eventually arrive. It will. The question is whether you will encounter it at a moment when you still have the resources to respond to it fully, or whether you will encounter it having spent those resources on the maintenance of a life that was never quite yours, in a body that has less energy than it once did, with a diminished capacity to make the changes that the pressure is demanding. The tradition was clear on this. The work of becoming, the individuation, the integration, the actual living of the actual life, is better done earlier than later. Not because it is impossible later, but because the cost of the postponement rises as the postponement extends. Every year the unlived life goes unlived is a year in which the pressure accumulates and the capacity to respond to it potentially diminishes. The urgency is not arbitrary. It is structural. Now let's get specific, because the structural argument alone is not enough to move anyone who has been postponing for years. The structural argument is understood and filed, and the postponement continues, because the postponement is not a failure of understanding. It is a failure of the felt sense of permission. The thing that actually moves people is not the understanding that they should begin. It is the experience of feeling genuinely that they are allowed to, that the actual expression of who they are is not a transgression, that the life that has been waiting in potential is not too much, not too presumptuous, not too exposed, not too different from what was expected of them. And this feeling, the feeling of permission, is not produced by argument. It is produced by the slow, interior work of dismantling the original verdict that made the postponement necessary in the first place. The original verdict was delivered early, and it was delivered by an environment that had specific and limited ideas about what was acceptable. The verdict said, in one form or another, that the full expression of who you are was too much, too inconvenient, too threatening, too outside the range of what would be loved. And the verdict was internalized so thoroughly that it became, over time, indistinguishable from your own assessment of yourself. The not yet does not feel like an externally imposed restriction. It feels like a reasonable personal judgment. I am not ready. It is not yet time. The conditions are not yet right. The voice saying these things feels like your voice. And in one sense it is your voice running a verdict that was delivered by someone else decades ago in a context that no longer applies. The work of dismantling the verdict is the work of integration. The slow, patient, unglamorous project of bringing into consciousness the exiled parts of yourself that the verdict was targeting, and of giving them, from the inside, the reception that the original environment could not give them. The creativity that was told it was not serious enough. The depth that was told it was too much. The wildness that was told it was unacceptable. The vision that was told it was impractical. All of this is still in you. All of it went into the shadow on the day the verdict was delivered. And all of it is still pressing, from the shadow, through the symptom of the unlived life, asking to come home. The integration is the coming home. The coming home is the beginning of the actual life. And the beginning of the actual life is the end of the postponement. Not because you have finally achieved the conditions the postponing mind was waiting for, but because you have finally understood that the conditions were never the obstacle. You were waiting for yourself, and you have finally arrived. What does this look like in practice? Not dramatically, not in the form of a single moment of decision that changes everything overnight. It looks like this. The next time the not yet arrives, the next time the postponing voice says it is not the right moment, you are not ready, the conditions are not yet right, you notice it. You feel it fully. You recognize it as the verdict, running again, in the familiar vocabulary of caution and preparation. And then, without waiting for the feeling of readiness that was never going to precede the action, you take one small step in the direction of the actual life. Not the whole life. One step, one sentence written, one conversation had, one boundary set, one expression of the actual self, however small, offered to the world without waiting for the guarantee that it will be received well. The step will be uncomfortable. It will feel premature. The postponing mind will immediately generate reasons why this particular step was not yet the right step either. This is expected. This is the mechanism doing what the mechanism does. The step happens anyway, and then another, and then another, and the accumulation of steps, each one taken without the guarantee the postponing mind was demanding, is what produces the life. Not the readiness. The steps, the actual, imperfect, exposed, unglamorous steps into the life that has been waiting in potential long enough. The life that is yours, the one that has always been yours, the one that only you can live, and that will not be lived by anyone else if you do not live it, and that will not be lived by you if you keep waiting for the moment that the postponing mind is promising but has never yet delivered. That moment is not coming. This moment is here, and the life you keep postponing is the only life you have. If this reached the place where the postponement lives, do something now. Write in the comments these 3 words. I begin today. Just that. Because writing it is the first step, and the first step is always the one that breaks the postponement. And give this a like if it moved something real in you. The next video continues into what the actual first steps look like. Not the dramatic ones, but the small, specific interior moves that begin to make the unlived life real. It is more important than you know. I will see you there.